Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:30. We will call to order the August 27, 2025 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. Ask everyone to please rise and ask Supervisor Long to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hand over heart, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair Webb.
Yes.
Director Long. Yes. Director Mulhart. Here. Director Pavia.
Here.
Director Kennedy.
Here.
All right. Agenda review. Any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to public comments. Anybody wishing to address the board on matters not otherwise on today's agenda is welcome to come forward and do so at this time. All right, hearing no voices and seeing no movement, we'll move on to executive officers' comments. John?
Yes, well, good morning, and good morning to all. And this, as my first regular board meeting, I'd like to introduce myself to the members of the community as the newly installed, as of the 11th of this month, executive officer. I've included in the package, you'll see I included a short bio, which is just basically the same version of the one that the public information officer posted in social media and various other outlets. It's out there. I've been a lot of places. Most recently, I was with the Navy down at Point Mugu as a sustainability lead for the test ranges, both our water range here off the coast and our land range out in the Mojave Desert. And what's curious about that is that both of the large operations within my portfolio there were both part of water rights adjudication. So I come from a bit of a history on that. I'm not going to read my bio or dwell on it. It's there for everybody's perusal. But I'm just wanting to say hello to everyone and let you know that my door is open, my email is open, my phone is open. I would not just appreciate, but I encourage people to reach out to me because I'd like to meet members of the community and start to engage in conversations as we work through these important issues. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Moving on to board member comments. Other than welcoming the new executive officer, I have none. Anyone else? All right. So we will move on then to the consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda, I guess 4, items 10 through 13. Unless someone has a question or a comment, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, the motion's carried. We'll move on to agenda item 14.
All right. Cool.
There we go. It's on now. Thank you. Hello again. I'm going to be presenting this item, which was part of the revision from the originally posted agenda to the current agenda. This item is to adopt a resolution which will direct us to collect a reduced fee of $24 per acre foot for the groundwater extraction sustainability fee. This agenda item was crafted in this way as the fiscal committee recommended the reduced rate based upon budget projections and based upon limiting our surplus. Again, we do not want to collect more than what we need as fairness to all the stakeholders. But it was also written this way as there are not detailed budget projections for the out years, and we're not sure what amount we will need to charge for those future years. Once we've done those detailed budget projections, we'll come back with a recommendation, which may be to keep it at 24, to revert to 29, or to come up with some other number. So in this format, it's just presented as we will collect $24 vice $29 for the upcoming water year as a sustainability fee.
Thank you, John. Any questions or comments from the board? Is there anyone out there in the public who wants to pay more than the $24? Come on up and tell us. That's, no, not being facetious. Any questions or comments from the public on this item? With that, let me return to the board. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2025-06?
Motion?
And a second?
I'll second.
And it's a resolution, so we need a roll call.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Mulhern,
Yes.
Director Jumpers,
Yes.
Director Paviola,
Yes.
Director Long.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on then to item 15, Board of Director compensation discussion.
Good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board. Jason Kander, Ventura County Counsel's Office, serving as agency counsel for the GMA. This item is on compensating your board for attendance at GMA meetings and functions. Historically, GMA directors have never been compensated for their service on behalf of the board. And in fact, the agency's enabling legislation, I'm sorry, Elka, could you just move it? I have the clicker, don't I? I'm sorry. Sorry, there we go. So, agency directors have never been compensated for the services that they provided on behalf of the agency. That includes attending meetings, attending events, functions, et cetera. And in fact, the agency's enabling legislation, the FCGMA Act, is silent on this particular issue. It neither authorizes nor prohibits the compensation of GMA directors. Approximately a couple months ago, Director Tremblay asked me to look into this issue about the process of compensating GMA directors. So in the absence, in the absence of the GMA Act providing or prohibiting for director compensation, there is another water code provision that applies generally to special districts or water districts specifically, that does authorize water districts to compensate their directors. So specifically, Water Code Section 20201 provides, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the governing board of any water district may, by ordinance adopted pursuant to this chapter, provide compensation to its members of the governing board, unless any compensation is prohibited by its principal act, in an amount not to exceed $100 for each day, for each day's attendance at meetings of the board, or for each day's service rendered as a member of the board by request of the board. So the GMA qualifies as a water district under this particular section. For purposes of this section, water district is defined to mean any district or other political subdivision other than a city or county, a primary function of which is the irrigation, reclamation, or drainage of land, or the diversion, storage, management, or distribution of water primarily for domestic, municipal, agricultural, industrial, or recreational purposes. The GMA's, in the GMA Acts, so even though the GMA Act itself doesn't include authorization or prohibition against compensating, the GMA's very first section provides the purpose of the agency, which is the agency shall exercise the powers provided in the GMA Act for purposes of groundwater management. A subsequent provision provides that the legislature hereby finds and declares that the preservation of groundwater within the territory of the agency for agricultural and municipal and industrial uses is in the public interest, and that the creation of the agency pursuant to this act is a common benefit for all users. So some of the initial findings of the GMA Act, the legislative intent, if you will, is and does designate the agency as a groundwater management agency with the intent of preserving the beneficial uses of water for these particular uses, which are agricultural, municipal, and industrial. Taken together, those are more than enough to qualify the agency as a water district under this particular generic provision, which does authorize water districts to compensate their directors. So a few requirements and limitations of this water code provision. The authorization to compensate directors must be in an ordinance. It can't be in a resolution. It can't just be by direction. There must be a notice and a hearing on the proposed ordinance before it's adopted. That notice must occur in accordance with this particular provision of the government code, which requires publication of the ordinance once for at least 2 weeks. The ordinance can authorize compensation of directors for up to 10 calendar days of GMA events in any given month. 11 is not allowed, but 10 is. And then whatever your board decide, or if your board decides to move forward with compensating directors, the ordinance can specify an initial per day compensation rate. Once that initial rate is established, that amount can be increased every year, but only once per year. And any increase above the $100 threshold cannot exceed 5% of the compensation received by members when the ordinance was adopted. So if your board does decide to move forward with compensating its directors, then the initial amount of per day compensation will be somewhat critical because it will affect what the new rates can be on an annual basis if your board decides to increase it. So what is covered by this compensation? Clearly, attendance at GMA meetings, advisory committee meetings is covered. Attendance at meetings and functions as required by your board or as directed by your board would be covered. Actual and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of official GMA duties, such as traditionally meals, travel, lodging, and other necessary and actual expenses. But if your board does decide to compensate for actual and necessary expenses, then it must also adopt a policy, a written policy that kind of lays out in a little bit more detail the exact expenses that will be covered. So that policy would include types of occurrences that qualify for compensation, the reasonable rates for travel, meals, lodging, and other necessary expenses. In the absence of that, the applicable IRS rates may apply. And a requirement that members must use government and group rates when reserving cars, lodging, and transportation. At the same time, if actual and necessary expenses are going to be covered, or your board chooses to cover or include within the compensable amounts, actual and necessary expenses, then we have to prepare some standardized forms for your board to fill out expense forms and submit them for reimbursement of those actual and necessary expenses. Finally, a couple final requirements. Your respective member agencies may have their own requirements that govern their directors or their board members' treatment of compensation. So notwithstanding the fact that the GMA board may decide to, I'm sorry, let me say that differently. If your board decides to compensate its directors, then any compensation that was received by any one of you may still be subject to the rules of your respective member agency. So, for example, in the board letter, I believe I included an example for the county. The county has a particular policy that requires certain treatment of all of its supervisors, or any compensation that all of its supervisors might receive while participating on a board or a commission. And so any compensation that a supervisor would receive would be subject to that particular member agency's compensation policy.
So I don't believe our Board of Supervisors get compensation for any boards that we sit on.
So I believe that there's discussion about what a policy might look like. And to the extent that that policy becomes, or
Right.
does become effective, then it would apply even if GMA decides to compensate your board.
Right. Just to note, we get no compensation. There's other boards, though, that do the $100. And Visera, I think, isn't VCTC also? So some boards members can get that. Thank you.
And so I apologize, I did not look at each of your individual member agencies, whether or not they have policies themselves on this particular issue.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead and finish? That's fine.
I got one more slide, sure. So with that, if your board does decide to move forward and decides to compensate its directors, there's a couple points of direction that we'd appreciate as we move forward with preparing an ordinance, if that's your board's direction. Specifically, what's the initial amount of, or what should the initial amount or rate of compensation be on a per-day basis? Again, under the water code, your board can set an initial compensation up to $100 per day. You know, what types of meetings qualify for compensation and or reimbursement of actual and necessary expenses? And what are the actual and necessary expenses if, for example, they are something other than travel, meals, and lodging? And then which account and funding source at the GMA should board member compensation be paid from?
Thank you, Jason.
With that, I'll
Questions
take
or
any
comments
questions.
from the
Yeah.
board?
Thanks, Jason. Let's see. There we go. Thank you for the presentation. I asked Jason originally to look at this because I thought from an equity standpoint, it would make sense for the board to consider this. What I have found serving on this board is that given the amount of time that I know all of us have spent, and I guess I would particularly think about the hours and hours and hours we have spent on fiscal committee relative to this agency's budget, together with the chair and with the staff who've done a great job. Given the amount of time that directors are spending, consistent with compensation provided by other regional entities, and you're right, VCTC, for example, will do it. Metrolink will do it as well. And from an equity standpoint, recognizing the time spent by directors, I would be in favor of setting compensation. I recognize that there are some directors who, who would not be compensated from that standpoint. Other directors who may qualify based on their district to receive compensation for attending these board meetings, and that's fine, and I respect that. What I would ask, and I'd be ready to make a motion at such time, but Mr. Chair, my thought would be for a motion to ask staff to put together or draft a draft ordinance for consideration by the board with an initial rate of compensation at $100 per day for attendance at GMA board meetings and board committee meetings only at this point, with the funding source being the operating fund and to provide actual necessary expenses, although I'm not frankly thinking that we really are going to have those at this point if it's just board meetings and committee meetings. But I'd certainly like to hear about that. So those would be my initial thoughts.
So if your lights are red and my light is off, can you hear me? It says it's on, so.
Doesn't, no, it's on.
It's
Oh,
like a
you gotta
green
tap
light,
it.
red
You
light.
have to have red light. Go.
Now you got the green light,
Nothing
Lynn.
to say. The devil is in the detail. And over time, at United, we've had to clamp down on folks that just showed up at all kinds of functions, had no business other than to observe or whatever, and we're billing the district, and we're going to stop that. That doesn't fall into the category. The only thing that I would ask that staff look at is the prior requirement, if I can turn my page correctly here. So the way we solve this problem is that if somebody believes that they should attend some function, they need to get approval from the, in our case, the board president, in our case, the board chairman. That seems to put a lot of stop to the just showing up and then having to unwind it. That was helpful. Actual and necessary expenses, travel, lodging, the cost of a function, and there are a lot of good functions in the state that are great for learning about water and the like, state agencies and the like. I think we need to have the ability to, if there's a purpose to go to some training program or state function, as long as we run it through the president of the board and we understand what that item is, we can expand this beyond just travel and lodging, and it should include, if approved, the attendance fee for these.
Training or education conference.
Yeah, whatever it is, there's a cost. I mean, you have to pay a fee, and they're not cheap. Some of them run in the neighborhood of $300 to attend, and it could be a 2-day or 3-day event. But the way we've dealt with it at United is you have to submit to in our case, to the president, the purpose, what you intend to accomplish, who you intend to meet, and then at the end, give us a briefing or an output, a report of what you may or may not have learned in the process. So we're trying to make sure that we're just not showing up at meetings. And we have within the county, for example, we have some very good outreach program with AWA, with the annual event at the Reagan Library. There are a lot of really good opportunities for us as directors to intermingle with other entities that are in similar positions or rely on the things that we do. And it's about building relationships. And I encourage people that if we can go to those, I think those are helpful for the district. They're helpful for what we do at United. So I don't want to draw this line so tight that, yeah, we'll pay for your travel, your lodging, but we won't pay for the fee for you to go to what's the point? And we ought to encourage directors to attend outreach activities that are in progress within the county. And I think that would then be the complete package. I'm okay with Tony's recommendation of starting at $100, but I would add these caveats in any drafting that staff makes on this issue.
Kelly?
Thank you. I do appreciate this item. I don't make any money going to any meetings, so I don't even pay attention to these policies normally. But I do understand that it does take time from other board members. I would like you to look at the policies based on VCTC and also Visera, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that we could look at some different models already that's out there and make sure the checks and balances are there. I do want to put some boundaries on the attendance of when you're paid $100 is only for the board meetings and the committee meetings. I don't think we should be paying for going to an event like AWA, maybe a registration fee, but I think that's just my own preference. But maybe look at what their policies are. I think it's good for conferences, but if we are to go to a conference, it needs to be transparent. So either the board approves that, hey, there's the Aqua conference. Who's wanting to go sign up? We approve that these 2 people are going or something. So maybe it's the chair or something, but just so that we have more transparency of what this agency is paying for. I would like that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board before we open it up to the public? Michael? All right, any comments or questions from the public on this item? Oh, I didn't mean you, Rob, I'm sorry.
Too bad. Chair West, members of the board, I would like to thank you for bringing this item up and the very thorough presentation from county staff on the framework for it. I support it. I am grateful to the time that you all have committed and to the time that all of your predecessors have committed to this agency, but it is a lot of time, and the public really appreciates that. I particularly want to support Director Tremblay's recommendation, and I think Director Long's endorsement of having very clear rules. I think it's important to draw that actually sharp line, and from my understanding of the presentation, the only thing that kind of gets locked in from the outset is the original rate in terms of reimbursement for reasonable expenses. That can be adjusted later, but given that this is new ground, my recommendation, and kind of hearing it articulated by these 2 directors, is start slow, start with attendance of board meetings and committee meetings that you are a member of, not just sitting in the audience and listening to. Yes, it takes time, but that's part of the commitment. And then over time, if it feels important and valuable to add expense reimbursement and add meetings per diems for attendance at other meetings, then you can explore that. But I think having served on multiple public boards, it's really easy when there's high transparency of these were the minutes, this person attended, and this was the per diem. When you start introducing expense reimbursement is when you start drawing scrutiny. So really appreciate the recommendations.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Darrell Smith, grower. 2 points. One, the compensation, excuse my voice, the compensation, would that include your meetings as the water master as well as for just Fox Canyon groundwater management? And secondly, I know you guys are attorneys, but it interests me the fact that when someone is compensated for something, they tend to exercise or be a part of a certain liability. And I don't know if that would apply in this case, but it seems as it's public, it would seem to me I would look at that and say, well, wait a minute, these guys are getting paid, they're working for me, and they didn't do this or they didn't do that. I'm outraged. It's just my viewpoint as a grower. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Darrell. Anyone else? Bert?
Hello, Bert E. Perello. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the agenda's item on the item. In full transparency, I'm an Oxnard City Councilman. There are various things that I go to that I am compensated for being on that board. I appreciate each of your comments, but I do follow along with Mr. Mulhart on his point. There are times when people go to meetings and it's showing up. I think it's a good idea to stick to the 2 items that you have. I would suggest that if you vary from that, that every seated board member is aware of the opportunity to take meetings and go on things. In other bodies, it seems sometimes that doesn't happen, and people will then wonder, well, I got a free trip. How did you get a free trip? I didn't get a free trip. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Just want to make you aware of that. I do think that starting at the $100 is a good idea, and the 5%, I wish some of the other bodies that have this, they would follow the same thing, because I can tell you as a representative for part of the city, but basically the city of Oxnard, every time there's a legal notice of another body getting a pay increase, it's always, asked, well, how do they bump it? How do they bump it? And I appreciate that there is actually some rules, and you guys are going to implement it if you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Anyone else? All right, returning back to the board, I think this is a let's give staff direction item only. There's no action. I concur with the comments that have been made. I think, though, the qualifying events need to be a little broader than just GMA meetings and committee meetings, because just in this last year, for example, there were times when board members have been drafted into attending litigation-related functions, mediations, things like that. Also times when board representation was necessary to testify in front of the state legislature. Those things would seem to me to be qualifying. Maybe they fall within the getting pre-approval from the executive officer for those sorts of exceptional things. But those are certainly discreetly GMA-related and necessary. So I think whatever we include should include some latitude for those types of things as well.
Do you have any thoughts on the question that was said about the water master? Because as I feel it, that today's meeting, we have a lot of different things, but it would be $100 for today.
That's right. No, as I understand,
Not like-
if my recollection of the judgment is correct, fees are prohibited to the water master. And so, which is, or compensation is prohibited to the board. But that doesn't apply to the GMA. Our meetings are,
Well, and I appreciate you saying that because that's important for the community to understand that as well. Thank you.
anything else? Jason, you have direction sufficient
So,
to?
so let me, if I may add one other item. There have been, over the years, there have been numerous months in the collective body of work that I've done where I've attended upwards to 15 or 16 events. The limit of billing for 10 is a secondary control factor.
But it's statutory.
It's statutory, but that doesn't stop me from having meetings that need to be done on behalf of the district and the citizens. And there have been periods of time where we have been incredibly busy at this agency based on the nature of what we're working on. So we have actually two checks and balances, well, three if you want. We have a financial limit and a financial limit to how it could grow. We have a limit of 10 meetings a month, and to some on the board, they can easily exceed that depending on what the topics are. And then we also have in the language the ability to spell out what we can get compensated for. So I think there's a lot of checks and balances in the language itself, and I don't want that lost in the process. I appreciate those checks and balances, but all three of these checks and balances have been operational for a long time. We're not inventing something new.
Anyone else? All right, again, this is the staff, this is direct staff. We have done that. We'll move on then to item number 16, the Cayugas ASR program representative.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dr. Farai Kasege, bringing item number 16 to you for consideration. And this is on the funding of a landowner representative to the Cayugas ASR study group through basin assessments. So as a background, the Las Posas Valley judgment provides that subject to the no injury rule, Cayugas may make reasonable use of the basin storage space to facilitate operation of the Cayugas Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project. The judgment, however, does not include parameters for the operations of the ASR project, but it does require the formation of an ASR study group to develop recommendations on 4 operating scenarios that are outlined in the judgment. The judgment also specifies the membership and qualifications for the ASR study group, and that is they have to be representatives of Cayugas, FCGMA, or Watermaster, and the landowner representative, being engineers or certified hydrogeologists or someone of that nature with enough experience to do that. The judgment also specifies the budget and cost sharing that has to the budget and cost sharing for this study group and the work that's done. Basically, it says that the FCGMA would shoulder about 20% of that, with Cayugas taking 80% of that. It also goes on to state that parties shall bear their own costs for attendance at meetings and analysis of the completed work. Now, the PAC submitted a recommendation report to Watermaster, and it basically states that that Watermaster fund the landowner's representative of the Cayugas ASR study group, Bob Abrams, through the basin assessment, and that's in Exhibit 16A. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ASR study group budget and cost sharing agreement basically says that the FCGMA or Watermaster pays 20% and Cayugas will shoulder 80%. But this applies to the cost of the Cayugas ASR study group. And in the Watermaster budget, the numbers we got from Cayugas basically put the amount at about 100,000 for the water master, for the FCGMA water master's portion for that. It, however, does not extend beyond the study group work to require either FCGMA or water master to fund a landowner representative's participation on the ASR study group. Sorry for the typo that's there. So this work is basically for the group work that's there, and then you have that section which says each individual party is responsible for funding the cost of attending the meetings and reviewing that information. The PAC also recommends that water master funding the landowner representative on the Cayugas ASR study group through the basin assessment is logical and simple. However, I think your board should note that some parties have protested water master's invoicing and payment of basin assessments, objecting to the fact that the basin assessments collected from all parties in the basin may be used for projects that do not benefit them. And with that, I have Exhibit 16B, where one of these parties basically makes that argument. So it is reasonable to anticipate that such parties may bring a similar protest to water master funding through the basin assessment landowner representative to the Cayugas ASR study group. So that's something for you to think about. So the recommendations from staff are to receive and file this presentation, and secondly, provide direction to staff on whether water master should prepare and execute a contract with the landowner representative on the Cayugas ASR study group. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for, any questions from the board at this time? Any questions or comments from the public on this matter? All right, hearing none, we'll come back to the board. Yeah, I'm not persuaded that the protests are meaningful, particularly since I think the entire basin benefits from the ASR project. We certainly saw that just a couple of years ago in the midst of the last drought when that project was called upon to provide supplemental water everywhere. With that, I guess I would make a motion to direct staff to prepare to execute a contract with the landowner representative on the Cayugas ASR study group.
Yeah, I agree, and I would second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion before we move the motion? All right, with that then, there's a motion to direct staff in the manner described. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried. With that, in a moment, we will recess into closed session. Before we do, you'll notice in the agenda that there are several litigation matters agendized for closed session. This is an opportunity for public comment with respect to any of those litigation matters. Anyone wishing to address the board concerning those is welcome to do so now.
Again, good afternoon. On the litigation, I don't know if we're allowed to ask questions, but on the Las Postas matter, the East Las Postas, is this litigation taking place between attorneys and the board?
You're allowed to ask questions, but we're not allowed to answer them.
Very well. Well, that was my question. If it was it involving attorneys or just, and if so, who? But if that's the case, then that's the case. I thank you very much, so.
I would
It was a nice try.
I would direct you to talk to our counsel, and he can provide any information.
Oh, terrific. Thank you very
you.
much.
Or may, can, may, shall, could.
I'll try asking Jason. He'll let me know, I'm sure.
With that, we'll be in recess to closed session. Thank you. I don't. You might check with Jason, but I don't anticipate any action that we'll need to report to you. No?